So the Super Mario Bros. Movie is out now in theaters, and let me tell you, people are already comparing it to the Sonic the Hedgehog movies. Like this idiot on Twitter, I do not condone this level of toxicity. That said, Mario and Sonic have always butted heads for 30 years, so naturally this was going to happen, like it's going to happen now in this video. I think it'll be interesting to see what the Super Mario Bros. Movie does in comparison to the Sonic the Hedgehog films, see what their strengths lie, see where their weaknesses lie. We're going to do that with 7 categories, including one bonus category at the very end, which will have spoilers for the Super Mario Bros. Movie. I'll try to keep the rest of the video as spoiler-free as possible, but still, I recommend checking out the Mario movie as well as the Sonic movies so you can contribute to the conversation in the comments below. With that said, let's get right into it. Let's start with a very important category, that being faithfulness to the source material, because let's face it, if you're going to adapt anything, be it a video game, a book, you have to be faithful to the source material. You can change some things, but if you change too much, you've already failed. And let's start with the Mario movie, and as you can tell, it's got faithfulness up the wazoo. The character models look very similar to how they look in the games, with a few differences, but sometimes they look ripped straight out of the video games, like Bowser, for example. Even the settings look ripped right from the games. These locales have never looked better in glorious 4K, with great animation from Illumination Studios. It just looks absolutely fantastic. Even the rules of the world behave and operate like a video game. They brought in the power-ups for corn's sakes. Mario eats a mushroom, he gets bigger, eats a mini mushroom, he gets smaller. You got Mario Kart rules with the Koopa shells and even the banana peels. It's all just very unapologetically a video game in a movie format. That does kind of lead to some flaws in the film, which we will get to later, but the Super Mario Bros. Movie feels like a Mario game adapted straight to the big screen. There's no question about it. You can tell Nintendo really had their eyes on this project to make sure it was absolutely faithful to the source material, and it sure as heck is. Sonic, on the other hand, it is still kind of faithful. They did take some creative liberties with the story. I still don't know what Long Claw is. What was that character anyway? They even have some elements of the games thrown in there, like the Labyrinth Zone in Sonic the Hedgehog 2. They also have the rings, which are portals now instead of things that heal Sonic. They even brought in the Master Emerald and the Chaos Emeralds into the second movie, so in that sense, it is still faithful, but the majority of the film is set on Earth in the real world. So in that sense, it still doesn't feel exactly like a Sonic game adapted to the big screen. The first Sonic movie began with Green Hill Zone, but he left that place really quickly, let me tell ya. And even some characters have been changed a bit, like Robotnik, for example. Yeah, he was a buffoon at times in the games, but in this movie, he's way more chaotic, I would say, pun intended. It very much feels like Jim Carrey is playing another Jim Carrey character instead of a Dr. Robotnik in that sense. Even though I still love Jim Carrey's portrayal of that character, it still takes a lot of creative liberties. That's not to say there's anything wrong with creative liberties, but if you're looking for a video game adaptation that just goes all the way with faithfulness to the source material, that clearly goes to the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Again, it just feels like a Mario game that was ripped right out of a Nintendo console and projected onto the big screen. Now let's go to the animation and visuals, and right away the Mario movie kind of has an unfair advantage in that it is 100% a fully 3D CGI animated film, and I'm sure Nintendo didn't want to do another live action sort of thing because of the Super Mario Bros. Movie from 1993, which was 99% live action, and that's not to say that that was what was wrong with the movie, but it certainly didn't help now, did it? And in the Mario movie, Illumination really stepped their game up for this. Like, they've always had good looking animated films before, but they were hardly ever the highlights of those movies. Here they really upped their technology by bringing in some gorgeous dynamic lighting that really makes the visuals pop. There's also some great reflections in those pipes, and also the animation of it all is just fluid and smooth. There's some really great combat scenes in this. The fight between Donkey Kong and Mario was insanely creative, along with the Mario Kart section, which was completely action-packed with all kinds of cool moves from Mario as well as the other cast members. I just gotta say props to CGI animators. They do amazing work that I can't even fathom how complicated it is, and I feel like their work just gets overlooked. The Mario movie has some great animation, and you know, so does the Sonic movie, to be fair. Sonic looks really good, especially after the whole fiasco with the original design, and along with Tails and Knuckles, along with some parts of the movie that were set in Green Hill Zone, which was not very many of them, the animation still looks great. But again, most of the movie is live action, so it can be kind of jarring seeing these CGI CGI anthropomorphic animals interact with real-world humans. It kind of makes the CGI stand out more in that regard, but with the Mario movies case, it's all CGI and it all looks great. So the animation and visuals category goes to Mario. Now let's get to the music, both in terms of using music from the games and using licensed music, because both of these movies, or all three of these movies rather, all contain both. And for this, we'll start with Sonic, because actually, one of my big complaints about these movies, even though I love them so much, is that they don't really use music from the games all that well. Like, yeah, they do have some spots. There's a little Green Hill Zone at the end of Sonic the Hedgehog 1, there was a subtle bit of the drowning music in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, but other than that, there were opportunities where they could have really just blown it out of the park with the music. They could have played the Sonic Heroes theme during the climax of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I don't know, throw in some Crush 40 tracks like Live and Learn every once in a while. Like, the Sonic games have such iconic music, I don't know why they don't incorporate it into the movies better. Instead, we get some original compositions from the film's composer, Tom Holkenborg, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, along with an array of pop music, which there's a lot of it in these movies. Off the bat, I can think of Queen. For some reason, they threw in Uptown Funk in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for a dance battle. Don't quite understand that musical choice. There's a lot of pop music, and I wouldn't say it's so obnoxious to the point where it gets unbearable, but there is, of course, a lot more than there are in the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Yeah, there's a few licensed tracks in the Mario movie, such as Holding Out for a Hero, there's Take On Me. Interestingly, there's a lot of licensed 80s music in this, and I think that's indicative of the era that the Mario series originally started. It is kind of jarring when these songs play, but there's only about maybe 4 tracks I can think of off the top of my head, maybe 5 that show up, and they show up at appropriate times at least. Like No Sleep Till Brooklyn in Brooklyn, okay, frankly, that was perfect. And that kind of brings up a larger point. The licensed tracks came in at appropriate times. Sonic's kind of was all over the place in that regard. But let me tell you about the soundtrack overall. My goodness, like I said about the faithfulness to the source material, it's like they ripped music from the games and put it in the movie. That's what you get when Koji Kondo's the musical supervisor along with composer Brian Tyler. There's some really deep cuts here. They played the Captain Toad theme when Toad showed up. What? I completely forgot that game existed, but of course Nintendo didn't because they're Nintendo. But that's just great how they just really just seamlessly blended in this music from the games into the movies at very appropriate times, like the Bowser's Castle theme at the very beginning. I think that was Bowser's Castle theme, and that's not even including the segment where Mario enters the Mushroom Kingdom for the first time and you're hearing bam Mario track, bam Mario track, just 4 or 5 different sort of Mario compositions that we've all heard just seamlessly blended together in this 2-minute scene. I love it. There's clearly no other winner here. The Mario movie takes the soundtrack and just brings a faithfulness to it that Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2 just did not achieve, and I hope they fix that with Sonic the Hedgehog 3. And you can tell how old I am when I say this, just bring in Crush 40. I want Crush 40 in my Sonic the Hedgehog movie. Just let it happen. Now let's get to humor, because you gotta have some humor in these kind of movies. They're intended for children. Children love to laugh. Adults love to laugh too. Let's not forget about the adults, and let's face it, a lot of adults are gonna see these movies because they grew up with these games. Now at first I was wondering which movie or movie series was gonna take this category, because I felt like the laughs in the Mario movie had a lot to do with the amount of Easter eggs that I saw, which there's a ton of Easter eggs in the Mario movie. So many. I forgot to mention that in the Faithful to the Source Material section. There are some in the Sonic movie too, but in that sense, I felt like the humor in the Mario movie, there were some parts of it where I was dying laughing. Like the section where they start driving through the Donkey Kong village, there was a part in there that really had me laughing. There was another part in the Mushroom Kingdom that involved apples that I was also laughing at. And also in our spoiler discussion, other crew members were talking about their favorite laughs in the movie. So there was quite a bit of funny moments in the Mario movie. Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2 also had some really funny moments, but I felt like there was also mixed in with them a lot of jokes that didn't land, like the Olive Garden one from Sonic the Hedgehog 1. What was that? Was that supposed to be funny? I don't know if I really laughed at that. I might have laughed at how awkward it was, but there was other bits too, like the bit about Dr. Robotnik being an orphan. I thought that was hilarious. Anything involving Agent Stone in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was quite funny. There were some really good moments from him as well, but other than those moments, I can't really think of anything that made me laugh out loud hysterically. Jim Carrey is fantastic as usual with his slapstick nature, but there's also really good slapstick in the Mario movie as well. In this category, I think I have to give the humor to the Mario film, just because there were more jokes in there that I thought really stood out, more funny bits, and some really dark ones too, like that Luma. That Luma needs a therapist. There's something up with that Luma. I don't know. Get some self-help books, buddy. Doesn't Rosalina have a library on that Comet Observatory? And I also didn't think there was a lot of jokes in there that didn't land. I felt like the jokes in there landed more so than they didn't. Unlike the Sonic movies, I felt like for as many jokes as there were that landed, there was just as many that didn't. So gotta give the humor to the Mario movie. Now let's get into the pacing of each movie, and this is where you already know who's gonna win this. If you saw the Mario movie, if you've seen the Sonic films, you already know who's gonna win this. Let's talk about the Mario movie, and its biggest flaw, in my opinion, is the pacing of the film. Goes by way too fast. Goes by so insanely fast that characters don't get time to breathe. There's not many moments. There's moments that are set up, at least, of characters going through some moment where they go through like an awakening of why they need to do what they need to do, but that's just completely glossed over in no less than 30 seconds. There's one scene in particular with Donkey Kong and Mario where they feel at their lowest, and that could have led to a great moment between the two characters, but it's over before it even begins, it feels like. There's a couple of moments like that too, especially during the climax. It all just feels really forced, and it felt like this movie could have used maybe 10 or even 5 more minutes to really get those scenes more fleshed out. But alas, it doesn't feel like the characters go through much development in this movie, which can't be said for Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2. I'm not saying Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2 are gold standards of writing. There are some flaws in there, of course, but you can't deny they're paced way, way better. There's plenty of moments for the story to slow down and really just breathe in the characters, really get to know each and every one and their struggles. And yeah, there are some weird moments like the wedding scene in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 that could have been used for something better, but by the end of the movie you felt as if you were on that journey for the appropriate amount of time, and it didn't feel rushed in the slightest. Same can't be said for the Mario film, which is why the pacing has to go to Sonic, which is ironic because Sonic's really fast, but the pacing of his movies are not as fast as the Mario movies. And kind of going off of pacing, I want to talk more about the characters themselves with this next category, character depth. The characters in the Mario movie, even though they have some really cool moments in them, especially Princess Peach, ultimately, I don't feel like their character development throughout the stories make sense, especially Luigi, who, I guess this is a minor spoiler warning, it's not really that much, I'm not really giving away any plot details, I'm just talking about his character overall. He kind of starts the movie being scared of everything, and he ends the movie kind of not being scared of much after that, for no apparent reason. There was no real trigger for how he overcame his fear, it just sort of happened. Same with Bowser. Bowser had a moment as well where you figured out his motivations, but then all of a sudden he flips a switch near the climax and he doesn't really care about those motivations anymore for whatever reason. And then there's Mario, who you can tell he has an inner struggle, but the way he overcomes that inner struggle feels awfully forced by the end. And you could argue, are we really watching a Mario movie to really see these characters overcome their inner demons or whatever? You could say no to that, but in the end, it's still a flaw in the writing, something that the Sonic movies don't really have. Of course, there are the human characters who are, let's face it, they're just there. They're just there at this point. I don't really care about them. I never cared about them in Sonic 1. I'm glad to see way less of them in Sonic 2. But when we get to the animated characters, you know, Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, those people have a purpose. Tails, I think, could use a little more development, but Sonic, we get to see him grow, we get to see him have this new family in Sonic 1 and Sonic 2. In the first movie, we really sympathize with his struggles of being in this world that's just completely alien to him, and he has a moment in the climax of Sonic 2 where he's about to straight up die, and he's just accepting it until he gets turned into Super Sonic. And at that point, he understands just how big of a world he's in, how important the Chaos Emeralds are. We see him grow throughout these 2 movies. We even just saw him grow, if we want to count one movie, we saw him grow a lot in Sonic the Hedgehog 1, fighting for his friends. And like I said, I'm not saying the Sonic movies are like a gold standard in writing or anything, but I do think they do character development way better than in the Super Mario Bros. Movie, and in that sense, I gotta give the character depth to Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2. Now this is where we get to the final real category before we get to the bonus category, that being the accessibility to the non-fans. So, the Mario movie. Right off the bat, you can tell this was made for the fans, like 110%, if not for the amount of Easter eggs you're gonna find right from the very beginning. Like, they're in the Punch-Out Pizzeria, for corn's sakes. There's a shop next to the Punch-Out Pizzeria with the Super Mario Sunshine logo on it. Luigi's ringtone is the GameCube logo. My goodness, this movie was made for the fans, unapologetically, right down to the settings that they showed during the montage of them traveling to the Donkey Kong Land, right down to the music, of course, which I brought up earlier. But does that appeal to non-fans very much? Not really. Like, I'm sure most people on planet Earth have played maybe 1 or 2 Mario games for at least like 10 minutes, right? But they're not going to really care so much about the power stars and what they do. They're not really going to care about the Easter eggs. And it also kind of brings it back to character development as well. A lot of things that don't make sense to a non-fan would make sense to a fan, like Toad wanting to be Mario's best friend, like right off the bat. I think a lot of us Mario fans just kind of accept that right away because we already know Mario and Toad, we already know they're friends in the game. So of course it's not going to be weird to think that when Toad just wants to be Mario's friend right out of the gate. But to a non-fan, they'll probably think, okay, that's a thing that happened. Why is that? Why does he want to be his friend all of a sudden? In that regard, there's just not a whole lot of explaining what this world is in the Super Mario Bros. Movie, and a lot of that is because a lot of fans are going to be watching this, and we don't really need an explanation. We just understand that this is the Mushroom Kingdom, and this is a place that we've seen for most of our lives because we've played the games. So, in that sense, the Mario movie is definitely made more so for the fans, not so much the non-fans, and that's where the Sonic movie differs. It's kind of a reverse situation. Both stories are isekai, which is essentially a story about a person that visits another world that's completely unfamiliar to them. In the Mario movie's case, it was Mario from the real world of Brooklyn to the Mushroom Kingdom, but in Sonic's case, it's from his world to the real world. So already, the non-fans are more in favor of this story. They can better understand it because it's set in our world more so than this world from a game that they've never played. And of course, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, they play more into the Sonic lore. They even add a lot more from the comics into the story. So in a sense, these movies are morphing to become more for the fans than the non-fans. But as long as non-fans watch the first movie, they get it. There's an explanation of what's going on. They explain the Chaos Emeralds and the Master Emeralds. And I wouldn't say it only caters to non-fans. Fans of Sonic love these movies for a reason. And I also think that's partly why the Sonic movies were favored more so by the critics than the Mario movie was. It's because the critics who reviewed the Sonic movie who's never played the games, they still get a fair understanding of what's going on because it's more tailor-made to introduce non-fans to Sonic. But in the Mario movie's case, it's expecting us to pretty much already know who Mario and company are. So with that, the Sonic movies win the category of accessibility to non-fans. But before we get to the victor, I want to talk about this bonus category, that being the post-credits scenes. So if you don't want to get spoiled for those scenes in the Mario movie, click away right now. Let's talk about it. Sonic the Hedgehog 1 ended with Tails. We know now that Tails is going to be in Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Fantastic post-credit scene. It really got us excited for the sequel. And then Sonic the Hedgehog 2 ended with Shadow the freaking Hedgehog. My goodness, so exciting, very exciting characters to see in sequels. And in the Mario movie's case, it had 2 post-credit scenes. One mid-credits of Bowser singing the song Peaches in his mini entrapped prison, which was just a fun little gag. But they did tease the next character for the Super Mario Bros. Movie too. It's Yoshi. Okay, that's cool. I don't know about you. I would have preferred Rosalina or maybe even Wario and Waluigi. Yoshi's cool, but not that exciting, I would say. It wasn't a very rewarding end credit scene, so, you know, we gotta give this bonus category to Sonic the Hedgehog, which kind of brings us to a tie. But here's the thing, I called this a bonus category because I don't really think a movie should be fairly judged by its post-credit scene. It contributes a lot to the conversation of the future of a franchise, sure, but in the end, I ultimately feel like the Super Mario Bros. Movie really just takes it over Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2. But keep in mind, once again, I love all these movies. I love all these movies. Everyone here at GameXplain loves them too, but Mario ultimately wins this battle because of its faithfulness to the source material, because of its animation and its visuals, along with its usage of the music, down to its better humor. I just feel like those are more important qualities to have in a video game adaptation. I just hope that in the inevitable Super Mario Bros. 2, they do a better job at the pacing along with the character depth. But when I put these two side by side, or rather three side by side with Sonic 1 and 2 over here and the Mario movie here, I gotta just, I love that Mario movie so much. I just had a dumb smile of joy the entire 90 minutes through, and I cannot wait to see what future projects Nintendo and Illumination are gonna work on next. You know, after the box office success of this movie, they're gonna work on a sequel, like right away, right now. They're working on it right now. But those are just our opinions on GameXplain over which is the best video game adaptation. Let me know in the comments what you think, and until next time, bye-bye.